Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is being old. You see the title, You Might Be Old If. I came across this meme and I thought it was very funny, and it was very key as to how I was feeling that particular day. Because here's the thing, we're all getting older. Today is the oldest you've ever been. Let that sink in for a second. Today is the oldest that you've ever been. Tomorrow, should you see tomorrow, God willing, it will be the oldest that you've ever been, no matter what your age. At the time of this recording, I'm 52 years old. And one of the things that I love in particular about turning 50 a couple of years ago was your assessment of where you are as far as your age is concerned, and also like what's next and what's ahead. And, you know, realistically, you're halfway, you're halfway to 100. And, you know, some of us will see 100. I'm not a believer in thinking, okay, well, yeah, I'm just going to live another 10, 15 years. No, I'm going to be around for a while. If I can make it to 125, that'd be great. But here's the thing, I don't control that, but the part of that I do control, taking care of myself, eating right, exercising, the whole nine, so I can be here for a very long time. My fraternal grandmother lived to be 95. I think I can catch grandma. I think I can catch Grandma Opal. Shout out to Grandma Opal. She's been gone now 8 years, but still miss her, still love her to this day. And I know she's looking down on me and smiling at this podcast and cussing because that's what she would do. But yeah, as you get older, you just appreciate things a whole lot more. And if you listen to this podcast at all, if it's your first time listening, thank you, first and foremost. But if you've listened to this podcast, you know that from time to time, I deal in nostalgia. I think it's very good to not only recognize where we are currently, but it's never bad to take a look back. And I think particularly if you went through the era in which I did in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, I think we saw a lot of great things and we did a lot of dope things and we got our hands on a lot of great things. And one of the things I think, and I always say about my generation, is that, we were the last generation without the internet. So we didn't know what it was like to grow up with the internet. In some ways it can be the gift, in some ways it can be a curse. And it's no knock, because none of us we don't have any say as to when we were born, right? Our parents just hadn't had sex yet. That's all. That's the only difference between me and you. And realistically, I would say the majority of my audience, their age is going to fall between 30 and 60. So most of you will understand some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So the meme just really delves into some things that we did over a period of time. And it says, you might be old if. So I'm just going to run down this and take a commercial break and then run down some more before we get out of here. First, and these are no particular order, you might be old if you ever used a rotary phone. Now, I don't think we ever had we never had a rotary phone, but we did have one at my aunt's house. And for you kids who, go to your Google machines to see what one looks like, because I'm not going to put a picture up here for YouTube. And for those who are watching on YouTube, thank you. Appreciate the love. But a rotary phone literally would be like you would put your hand in the middle. Like, let's say if you were using the number 9, you put your hand on the 9, circle it, and then it would come spin back. And then if you did a 7, do 7 and then come back, and then so forth and so on until you dial the 7 numbers. This was back in the time where you didn't have to use your area code. At least that's from what I can remember. I don't ever remember using a rotary phone and dialing 10 digits. That never happened. Or 11 digits, because you could have been dialing long distance. Shout out to long distance too. So you might be old if you ever used a rotary phone. I stand guilty as charged. Definitely used a rotary phone. You might be old if you used a floppy disk. Shout out to the floppy disk, man. Floppy disks were key back in the day. Long before we had iPhones and MacBooks and computers and all of this stuff, that floppy disk was everything, man. That floppy disk, in a lot of ways, held a lot of important information. I mean, you take a look at these cell phones. These cell phones carry everything. They are our lifeline, if we're being honest. I don't know what I would do without this iPhone. For one, I could tell you this. I wouldn't know anybody's number because I don't know anybody's number. I know my wife's number. I know my mom's number. And that's about it. Because you don't think about memorizing anybody's number anymore because it is pointless, because our cell phones hold it all. It holds all of the information. But yeah, you might be old if you use the floppy disk. I stand guilty as charged. And I know, just from glancing over this meme, I'm going to say that I did a lot of this stuff because, well, simply put, I'm old. You might be old if you used a typewriter. Man, listen, the typewriter, and if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. I'm holding up a keyboard here, which is what I use to type on my desktop, not on my laptop. But listen, a typewriter was everything because you literally had to type things out, and it would, I guess for lack of a better term, staple the words or the letters on the page. Kids, Google typewriter. Just go to your Google images and type in typewriter. A typewriter was everything. Honestly, that's where I learned how to write. Like, I'm a really good writer. I don't really write a lot anymore. But my skills were honed. My skills were honed on a typewriter. I used to just love the way it sounded. And I love when you get to the end and then it stops and it goes back to the other side. Oh man, that was the dopest. Yeah, I love typewriter. I haven't seen a typewriter in years. I want to say the last time that I typed on a typewriter had to be like maybe the summer before I went to college. And so that was 1991. So it's been over 30 years since the last time I've actually typed on a typewriter. By the time I got to South Carolina State University, which is where I went to school and graduated, we had kind of moved towards word processors. I had a word processor, and then I had to go type up my papers and stuff in the computer lab at Belcher Hall. Shout out to Belcher, the business, the School of Business, Belcher Hall. So yeah, typewriter was dope too. You might be old if you took pictures with camera that required film. Man, do you remember going to like your local drugstore or something like that to get your film developed? Man, listen, that was dope, but it was also like painstaking at the time because, you had to be careful about the kind of pictures that you took, because some places weren't going to develop your pictures just because. If they were a little risque, this is before you could take pictures with your cell phone. But yeah, taking pictures with camera with film, man, was dope. I stand guilty as charged. I definitely did that. You might be old if you listen to music on a CD. For those of you scoring at home, kids, a CD is a compact disc. I think we've all done that. I mean, unless you literally and figuratively grew up over the last 20 years, you probably didn't. Well, maybe not even 20 years, because at some point you had, I think even a 20-year-old would have had to, I think, probably caught the end of the CD era before we moved to the internet. Yes, CDs were everything. I still have several boxes of CDs in my garage. And it's crazy because like sometimes I really want to play my CDs. And for a while, I didn't know where I could play them because I didn't have a CD player, right? And so, funny story, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell y'all this, but what was it? When I get the car? 22? Okay, so I bought my car in 2022, right? And it's a decent car. And I had the car literally for like 2 years before I realized that there was a CD player in the car. I had no idea. And it's right there in the front. It's right there in the dash. But I never really paid attention to it. And so I remember one day I was like, man, I would like to play this CD, but I don't have nothing to play it on. And my son Cameron goes, Dad, you got a CD player? And I'm like, where? And he's like, in your car. I was like, word? Where? He was like, right there. And he showed it to me. And again, if you have a Lexus, you know that it's right there. And it was a new car when I got it, but I wasn't focused on playing CDs. So yeah, I'm almost embarrassed to tell y'all that story, but from time to time I will grab a CD and pop it in the CD player now that I know that it's there and listen to music on a CD. Now it's not the same as listening on Spotify or Apple Music or something like that, but I do that from time to time. You might be old if you've made a mixtape. I mean, listen, if you didn't make this was before the days of playlists, right? If you didn't make a Slow Jams Get the Draws mixtape, I don't know what to tell you. Because everyone that I know, male and female, have done that. And it didn't necessarily have to be a Slow Jams tape. It could have been some of your favorite hip hop songs or some of your favorite reggae songs or some of your favorite go-go songs. Shout out to Go-Go. Rare Essence, my favorite. Yeah, I mean, like who didn't make mixtapes? To have come through our era, you would have had to have made a mixtape. So yeah, I'm old. You might be old if you owned a Walkman. Long before the CDs and the cell phones gave you your music, you had a Walkman, and a Walkman did just that. It was a tape deck at first where you put your tapes in, and it was portable. Instead of walking around with your 15-pound boom box on your shoulder, you had a Walkman, and you could just put your tape in, put on your headphones, and walk around and hear music. It predated the AirPods and all of that good stuff like that we have now. And I remember when you had a Walkman that was just for tapes, and then they moved the Walkman to the CD player, so it was just a single disc. You could listen to that, and that was a game changer for us. So you might be old if you used the Walkman. The aforementioned boombox. You might be old if you ever used the boombox and listen to music on the boombox. Listen, I don't care what anybody says. In the 80s, there was nothing cooler than listening to music on a boombox. And the louder your boombox was, the doper you was. If you had a boombox we used to call them ghetto blasters because they would make, some of them were built just to make that much noise to where you turned on your boombox and the whole neighborhood heard you. It was the first, version of a portable speaker that you could have. And it was everything. So yeah, if you listen to music on a boombox, you're definitely old. Another thing, you might be old if you ever watched a movie on VHS. Man, listen, that was very prevalent in my house. We watch movies on VHS. We watch videos on VHS. We watch a little bit of everything on VHS. I think probably the first time me and my friend saw a skin flick, it was on VHS. It had to be. It was on VHS. It was the summertime. I remember that joint. I ain't gonna say who brought it to the crib, but if you lived on our block, because we all were there watching it in amazement. because his dad had. Now let me stop before I mess around. And only people on my street would know who I'm talking about. But yeah, it was the VHS was everything. And subsequently it goes into the next. You might be old if you ever rented a movie from Blockbuster. Man, long live Blockbuster, man. Salute. Blockbuster was ahead of its time to be able to, rent a movie, your favorite movie, or whatever movie that you wanted to see, and take it home and have it for a day or two or three, or maybe even a week, and see it as many times as you want. The only thing that you had to do was you had to make sure that you rewound it back to the front when you dropped it off. Man, Blockbuster, you couldn't tell me that Blockbuster wasn't going to be around forever. That was one of those things, man. When it got phased out, it just got phased out. Obviously with the advent of DVDs and then the Blu-ray, people just, they could do it from home. So there was no need to rent VHS videotapes anymore. And Blockbuster tried to stay, with the current times, but it just caught up to them, man. Long live Blockbuster. Next, you might be old if you learned how to write in cursive. Listen, this is one of the things that frustrates me the most about school today. These kids don't know how to write in cursive. We had to learn. And I'll be the first to admit, my cursive it's not dope at all. I mean, like, my name, when I sign my signature, it is super dope because I've practiced it my whole life. But if you ask me to write a paragraph in cursive, you might not be able to read it. But here's the thing. I remember distinctly when our oldest son, Dion, who's 25 now at the time of this recording, I remember when he came home and said, well, yeah, we're not doing cursive anymore. And I was like, what? Say word? For real? No, this can't be. And the teachers and the curriculum just said they weren't teaching the kids how to write in cursive anymore. The only thing that they were going to do is, obviously work with them on signing their name. But I remember having to write stories, having to write book reports in cursive specifically. And one of the things that I really loved about like my mom's generation and the generation before them, because education was such, particularly for those in the South, it was such a standard for them. Like their teachers really, really got on them about their handwriting. And I would venture to say this to any one of you who has, if you're my age and your parents are still here, or even if your grandparents are still here, ask them to write something in cursive for you. I'm willing to bet you 9 times out of 10 their penmanship is damn near flawless. It's because when they went to school, their teachers really, really honed in on the fact that their handwriting wouldn't be sloppy. Over a period of time, we got kind of sloppy. It is what it is. But yeah, I don't know anybody that's older than me, that's elderly, who doesn't have great penmanship. It is the wildest thing. And it's only because their teachers really, really stayed on them and got on them about, writing, their handwriting and making it look nice and presentable. You might be old if you played an Atari. Listen, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. The Atari 2600, I never forget, I got it for Christmas one year. It was and still is the best Christmas gift that I ever got. You could buy me a Porsche this Christmas. It ain't going to beat that Atari 2600. You could buy me a hotel building. You could buy me a trip around the world. It's not going to matter. It's not going to beat that Atari 2600 that I got for Christmas. So yeah, you might be old if you played the Atari, and the Atari was everything. Next up, you might be old if you watched Ed Sullivan. Now, Ed Sullivan was an old white guy who had I guess it was like a variety comedy show. I ain't that old. So far of all the things that I've mentioned, I'm not old enough to remember Ed Sullivan. I know who he is, but as the older generation would say, that's before my time. That is way before my time. let's see what else. You might be old if you used a payphone. Bruh. Payphones were the thing, man. I remember using a payphone probably up until, I want to say like maybe 1999, 2000. And the only reason why I remember is because in 1999, we had our son Dion. And I remember at the time, my girlfriend at the time is now my wife. She was pregnant with Dion, and she would text me. Not text me. I'm sorry. She hit me on the pager. She wouldn't text me. She would page me. And so I used to roll around Atlanta in my Nissan Sentra. And I had a bunch of quarters in my ashtray because I don't smoke, never smoke. And so I would always like go to a payphone and then page her back, or she'd call me at whatever number what the payphone was. Payphones were dope, man. I really enjoy payphones. But payphones, they had to go. I mean, McNulty and Lester Freeman made sure the payphones got out of here, and it did. Shout out to The Wire. Now it's time for a quick commercial break. On the other side of the break, I'll tell you about a few more things that you might have done, and that would tell you that you're old. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. Here we go. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle podcast. And we're talking about things that would remind you of the fact that you're old. Before the break, I gave you several, and I got a few more before we get out of here. Next question. Next statement. You might be old if you ever sent or received a fax. Same. I've sent fax messages and I've received fax messages. We still got one. We still have a fax machine in this house. I don't know why. I have to ask my wife as to why we still have a fax machine. I mean, it's of no use. And probably up until like maybe a couple of years ago, we had a house phone in here. I don't even know. I don't know why we had a house phone, because it got to a point where, and my number to my house didn't change. But it got to a point where it was like, why do we have a house phone? Everybody's calling us on our cell phone. So we eventually got rid of the house phone. But I remember distinctly that we had a house phone, and then the fax number was like 2 digits off the house phone number. So yeah, we did have a fax machine. We still do have a fax machine. But don't send me no faxes. You might be old if you had a MySpace account. Now, I'll be honest, never had a MySpace. So this is one that I don't qualify for. And it's not because I don't know. At the time MySpace was really, really popping, I had a blog. So I was like, and I still have that blog. I don't blog there much, but I was just like, nah, I don't need MySpace. And I always thought people had dope pages. I like how I used to go to people's pages and the music and stuff would be playing as soon as you hit the page. But I never got into MySpace. And to be honest, I never really spent a lot of time on people's pages. Like I go check something and be off. Like I may have spent less than 10 minutes on anybody's MySpace page, at least all of the MySpace pages that I visited. I probably spent maybe 10 minutes total on those pages. You might be old if you ever ordered music from Columbia House. Listen, I ordered so much music from Columbia House, and it was supposed to be a penny, and I never paid those people. I got like half of my CD collection from Columbia House. I don't know how they expected us to pay. I mean, like, you tell me that you're going to send me 20 CDs and all I got to do is send you a penny? Sure, who wouldn't sign up for that? You might be old if you have an AOL address. Yeah, you're definitely old if you have an AOL address. Now, if you had an AOL address, I can understand because that was the thing that was popping back then. But if you have an AOL address in 2025, you're really old and you probably need to get rid of it. And yes, I'm talking to you, my homeboy, Danny Green. Because Danny and I, that's my boy. We went to South Carolina State together. Shout out to Green. He still has an AOL email address. And every time I email him, I just chuckle because, like, why does he still have an AOL email address in 2025? I have no idea. He's got other email addresses, but the email address that I have for him that he still will send and receive emails on is an AOL email address, and he's way too old for that. Let's see. You might be old if you had to access the internet via dial-up. Any and everybody from our generation, that's what we did. We didn't have a choice. You had that sound, and it dial-up was what it was. Because think about it. If you were on like the top speed and you didn't have to use dial-up, that stuff cost. Dial-up was cheap. I can't even remember what was high speed internet called. I can't remember. I'm sure you're probably looking at your speakers and yelling at your speakers what it is. I can't remember. Hit me up and let me know. But yeah, dial-up was, I mean, it's what we use, and it took a minute for it to get through. And it's funny because, like, sometimes when I think about dial-up, I think about like how with the easiest of ease, we'll send, like, I could send you a picture of me and the kids, or me and Sharice, or me and my mom, or me and my dad, or me and my brother. And it's just like that. You get the pictures like that. But if you sent me a picture in 2001 on my dial-up, man, it's going to take, if you sent 3 pictures to me, man, it might take 30 minutes. It might take 30 minutes for those pictures to come up on my computer. Not on my phone, on my computer. Let's see, what else? You might be old if you had an encyclopedia. We had encyclopedias. We were one of the few families on our block that had encyclopedias, because encyclopedias cost. You might be old if you ever used the phone book. Listen, the yellow pages, the white pages were everything. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how many times I got a girl's phone number from looking it up in the phone book. And the reason why I would do that was because, listen, if your father's name was Gerald Brown, and I'm just using this as an example. If your father's name is Gerald, well, let's just say your father's name is Walter Brown. If your father's name is Walter Brown, and I know that your phone number is in your dad's name, and you live on Irving Court, all I got to do is go to Walter Brown in the phone book and then look at the address. Boom, there's the number right there. Listen, man, we had ways, man. We had ways. You might be old if you ever sent a postcard. I'm old enough to remember postcards. I'm old enough to remember sending postcards. I'm old enough to remember receiving postcards. I'll be honest, I never sent anybody a postcard. Sorry. So I don't qualify for this one. You might be old if you used a paper map. Shout out to Rand McNally. Yeah, I did this all the time. In fact, studying paper maps helped me with my love for geography. If you know me, I'm a huge geography buff. I love looking at maps, even to this day. I mean, like, I'll go look at a city and pull it up on Google Maps and try to find ways to get around and that type of stuff. I love it. I mean, I don't use it as much now because obviously we have GPS. So GPS will tell you from how to get to where you're going from point A to point B. You might be old if you owned a dictionary. Listen, the dictionary was your lifeline. If you didn't own a dictionary, I mean, you couldn't. Keep in mind, there was no cell phones. There was no internet. So how else was you going to get information and learn how to find out how to spell something if you didn't have a dictionary? Because we had a dictionary for one specific reason. If you ask your mom how to spell something, or if you ask your dad how to spell something, what's the first thing they're going to say? What? Go look it up. I used to hear go look it up so many times in my life, man, it was ridiculous. You might be old if you've written a check. Yeah, I've written a few checks. I haven't written, but I'll be honest, I haven't written. When's the last time you wrote a check? When the last time you wrote a check? Man, I can't even remember the last time I wrote a check. It's been that long. 10 years maybe. Yeah, I'd say probably about 10 years ago. Wow. Yeah, it's been that long. You might be old if you ever had to uncurl a telephone cord. Listen, man, if you've ever been on a phone and you're a young kid and you were rapping till the sun came up, you got tangled up in that cord. See, these kids don't know nothing about that because they got cell phones. There's no such thing as a cord. They don't have to worry about anything. But if you were rapping on the phone and you was up under the covers and you know what I'm saying? Yeah, man, I just can't wait to see you. I mean, it's just, I really, really like you for real. And, you know, I think you're very pretty. If you were doing all of that, you got wrapped up in a telephone cord. I mentioned a little earlier, you might be old if you owned a beeper. I definitely owned a beeper. But I will say this much, though. Of the friends that I have, I probably was the last one to get a cell phone. I held on to the beeper for a long time. I was actually anti-cell phone. I was like, man, I don't even want nobody to be able to get in contact with me instantly. Why would I want to do that? And I was the last one. Like, my friends will tell you, I was the last one to get a cell phone. I don't think I got a cell phone until probably 2000. Probably either 99 or 2000. So it's been, and everybody else was getting cell phones by then. And let's see, last but not least, and it goes without saying, you might be old if you played outside and not online. Listen, there was no such thing as online when I was coming up. It was outside. And the reason why you wanted to be outside was because everything was happening outside. It didn't matter what was going on or what was going down. Everything was happening outside. Being in the house was terrible. Like, it was the worst. Who wanted to be in the house? All your friends are outside. All the girls are outside. Why would you want to be in the house? Everybody's playing ball outside. Being in the house was for lames. In conclusion, I think if you answered yes to most of these questions, then you're probably old. And like I said earlier, today is the oldest that you'll be. Tomorrow you will be older. So let's just pray to God that we get a chance to see tomorrow and get a chance to reminisce about some of these things, because not only do these things indicate that we're old, but it also indicates that we have been here and we have a legacy and we have memories. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. That's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays at midnight. If you're on social media, follow us there. We're all across the board, 12 Kyle podcast on Twitter X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. As I mentioned, this podcast can be heard anywhere. We're also on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Download and subscribe there as well. And then share it with your friends. Tell everybody about this podcast because we got some dope shit over here, for real. And if you'd like to contribute financially, we would love that because we need money. $, TWELVEKYLE. That's on Cash App. Also, we have merch. If you look in the description box, there's a link that says merch. Click that link. You can buy 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. And last but not least, we do have a new baby. I don't know if you know about this, but we do have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is a music podcast where we talk about music and artists from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Listen, it is the best music podcast that you've never heard. So you definitely need to check it out and then send it to someone else who loves music just like you. And let me know what you think. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle with another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast, reminding you of the things that let you know that you are old. Again, I'm 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5 G's. Cheer.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.